The thing about falling for your boss is that you never expect it to happen over spilled coffee and a deadline. The thing about falling for your boss's sister? That's the kind of chaos no HR policy could ever fix. Emily Hartman wasn't supposed to kiss me. Not that night. Not in that dimly lit office when the city outside felt too quiet to be real. But she did. And for a moment her lips on mine, her hand trembling against my cheek, it felt like the world stopped just to let us breathe. Then, as if nothing happened, she straightened her blouse, whispered, "Forget this," and walked away. But I couldn't. Emily was the kind of woman people notice when she entered a room. Not because she tried to be, but because she carried herself like someone who had already survived a dozen storms and learned to smile through the rain. She was my creative director, my mentor, my nightmare, and somehow the person who made my heart race for reasons I couldn't justify. I was Claire Bennett, 27, newly promoted assistant editor at Hartman & Cole Publishing, where ambition was the company language and emotions were considered an occupational hazard. When I joined, Emily was a legenda woman who rebuilt the company after a near bankruptcy, who demanded perfection and gave nothing less. I admired her before I even met her. Then I met her and everything got complicated. She was colder than I imagined, sharper, like ice that burned when you touched it. Yet, beneath that armor, there were moments when her eyes softened, when she'd laugh at my nervous jokes or stay late with me to finish a layout, her voice turning quiet as she corrected my mistakes. Those were the nights that ruined me. The kiss happened 2 weeks ago. It was 11:47 p.m. We were finalizing the winter issue, exhausted, running on caffeine and sarcasm. I was typing corrections when I spilled my coffee over her notes, her perfectly handwritten notes. "God, I'm so sorry," I'd stammered, reaching for tissues, heart pounding. Emily sighed, brushing her hair back. "It's fine, Claire. Breathe." I don't know what possessed me to look up then to see her eyes soften, to notice how close she was, to feel that strange pull between us like gravity had chosen to ignore every law. She leaned in first. Her lips were warm, steady, confident. Mine were trembling. The world narrowed to the scent of her perfume, the sound of our hearts racing. And then just as quickly it was over. "Forget this," she whispered. "We can't." But I couldn't forget. And worse, she acted like she already had. 2 weeks later, she walked into the office on a Thursday morning, immaculate as always in a gray suit, holding her phone to her ear. I was buried in manuscript edits when she stopped beside my desk. "Claire," she said, voice even, controlled. "I need you to come with me this weekend." My fingers froze mid-typing. "What for?" "A wedding." I blinked. "A wedding?" She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "My sister's." That was the moment my heart split clean in two. We drove out of the city that Friday morning. Her car smelled like cedar and mint. The air between us was taut, every mile filled with unspoken questions. I stared out the window, watching the skyline fade into endless green. "So," I said finally, forcing a casual tone, "you and your sister are close?" Emily gave a small, humorless laugh. Close enough for her to steal my ex. I turned to look at her. Wait, what?" "She's marrying him," she said simply, eyes fixed on the road. Didn't I mention that? No, she hadn't. The silence that followed felt like a wound. We arrived at a small vineyard in upstate New York, a place that looked stolen from a wedding magazine. Fairy lights strung between oak trees, white roses blooming like snowflakes. As we stepped out, I watched her shoulders tense, her jaw tighten. She looked beautiful and broken all at once. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her she didn't have to face this alone, but I wasn't sure what I was allowed to be to her anymore. Her mother greeted us first, eyes flicking between us with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. "And this is?" she asked, her tone dripping with polite interrogation. "My assistant," Emily said quickly. The word hit harder than I expected. That night, in the guest house, I lay awake listening to the faint sound of laughter drifting from the main house. Emily's voice was somewhere in that noise, polite and distant. She hadn't spoken to me since dinner. When I finally stepped outside for air, I found her by the vineyard fence, a glass of wine in hand, her hair catching the moonlight. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I said softly. She turned, her eyes glassy but fierce. "Neither should you." "Then I'll stay." We stood there, quiet. The night smelled of grapes and earth, heavy and alive. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked finally. She exhaled slowly. Because you're the only person who doesn't expect me to be okay. That confession cut deeper than I expected. She told me everything then about her ex, about how her sister had fallen for him while Emily was drowning in work. How their parents told her to be mature, to forgive, to show up smiling. I listened, watching her walls crack piece by piece until she looked small and human and heartbreakingly real. Do you hate her? I asked. Emily shook her head. No. I hate that I still care. Something inside me shifted. I stepped closer until our hands brushed. You don't have to be strong all the time, Emily. She turned to me slowly, eyes glistening. Don't say things you don't mean. I mean every word. And this time when she kissed me, it wasn't a mistake. It was a surrender. The world tilted again. Her hands framed my face, gentle but desperate. The kiss was everything the first one was, slow, honest, aching. When we broke apart, breathless, she whispered, Claire, I can't ruin you too. You're not ruining me, I said. You're saving me. For a second it looked like she might believe me. But the next morning she was gone. The wedding day arrived under a gray sky. Emily moved through the crowd like a ghost, smiling, greeting, pretending. I watched her from afar, my chest tight with words I couldn't say. Then, as the ceremony began, something in her snapped. When the groom, the man who once loved her, took her sister's hand, I saw Emily's expression falter, just for a second. And that second broke me. Afterward, she found me by the garden. I shouldn't have brought you, she said quietly. Maybe you should have brought someone who didn't care, I replied. Her eyes softened. I didn't want anyone else. The wedding reception had already begun when the first drops of rain started to fall. Light, hesitant, like even the sky didn't know whether it wanted to cry or not. People rushed under the tent, laughter echoing through the vineyard as waiters adjusted the lights and moved trays of champagne to safety. I stood near the edge of the garden, watching Emily through the crowd. She was laughing with someone, her hand brushing the sleeve of a man I didn't recognize. Her eyes, however, were somewhere else. Every few minutes she'd glance in my direction. And when our eyes met, it was like everything else dimmed, the chatter, the music, even the rain. Only us. And yet she didn't come over. The man leaned in closer to her, saying something that made her smile, one of those polite, rehearsed smiles she wore like a mask. I felt a pang I couldn't explain, the kind that sat deep in your stomach and refused to move. I turned away, pretending to admire the flower arrangements. Anything to keep my heart from showing on my face. Claire. It was a familiar voice, Sophie, Emily's younger sister, the bride. She looked radiant, her white gown soaked slightly at the hem from the rain, her cheeks flushed with champagne and happiness. I'd seen her only in passing before, but now up close I could see the resemblance, the same hazel eyes, the same proud posture. You're Emily's assistant, right? She said, smiling brightly. Yeah, I replied, trying to sound casual. Congratulations. It's a beautiful wedding. Thank you, she said, looking around fondly. Emily helped plan half of it, you know. Even after everything. I raised a brow. After everything? Her smile faltered for the briefest second, then returned. Well, I mean, it must have been awkward. Since she and Daniel dated. But Emily's always been strong. She told me she was over it. Strong. Over it. Words that didn't fit the woman I'd kissed under the stars 2 nights ago. Sophie's voice softened. You know, she always pretends nothing hurts her. But she feels more than she admits. I looked over Sophie's shoulder. Emily was still with that man, laughing now, but her fingers were twisting the napkin in her hand. She does, I murmured. She really does. By the time the first dance started, the rain had stopped, leaving the world glistening under the lights. The bride and groom swayed slowly, surrounded by guests filming and cheering. Emily stood at the edge, a glass of champagne untouched in her hand. I walked toward her before I could stop myself. You look like you want to disappear, I said softly. She turned startled, then sighed. Do I? Yeah, like you're waiting for someone to pull you out of here. Her lips curved slightly. And who would that be? Maybe me. For the first time that night, her smile reached her eyes. We slipped away from the crowd, walking toward the vineyard where fairy lights draped over wooden fences like golden threads. The air smelled of wet soil and lilac. Emily exhaled, tilting her head back toward the sky. You ever feel like you're living someone else's story, Claire? Like everyone's waiting for you to play your part, but it's not who you are anymore. All the time, I admitted. Especially lately. She glanced at me curious. I hesitated, then added, ever since that night in the office. The tension that always hummed between us sparked again, stronger this time. She looked away. You weren't supposed to remember that. Well, I did, I said. And I'm not sorry. Emily's breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. Claire, this isn't wrong. I interrupted. Because it doesn't feel wrong. Feels real. Maybe that's what scares you. Her eyes darkened. You think I'm scared of you? I think you're scared of what you want, I whispered. The silence that followed was electric. Then she moved so suddenly that I barely had time to breathe before she kissed me. It wasn't gentle this time. It was fire. Her hands gripped the back of my neck, pulling me closer, her lips desperate and searching. And I met her with everything I had: weeks of confusion, longing and hurt poured into that one impossible kiss. When she pulled away, her breath was shaky. This can't happen, she said. Then why does it keep happening? I shot back. We didn't notice Sophie until it was too late. Her voice cut through the night like a blade. Emily. Emily froze. My stomach dropped. Sophie stood a few feet away, eyes wide, not angry, just stunned. Her veil was gone, her lipstick slightly smudged, and for a moment she didn't look like a bride. She looked like a sister betrayed. What are you doing? Sophie asked quietly, her voice trembling. Emily stepped back, her hands falling to her sides. Sophie, please don't, Sophie said. Don't lie. I saw. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sophie looked at me, then hurt flickering behind her shock. You're her assistant, right? That's what she told Mom. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Emily tried to reach for her sister. It's not what you think. Oh, I think it's exactly what I think, Sophie snapped. You couldn't stand me being happy, could you? You had to take something from me again. That's not true, Emily said sharply. You took Daniel from me, Sophie. I didn't take anything from you. Sophie's breath hitched. You're unbelievable. And then she turned and walked away fast, her heels clicking against the stone path, leaving Emily standing there like the world had just caved in. Back in the guest house, Emily paced like a trapped animal, running her fingers through her hair. I shouldn't have brought you here, she said. Stop saying that, I replied. She turned on me, eyes flashing. Look what happened. My sister hates me, the whole family's going to find out, and you... Me? I asked, stepping closer. What about me? You don't deserve this, she said, voice breaking. You deserve someone who isn't ruined. I swallowed hard. You're not ruined, Emily. You're just scared. She looked at me then, really looked at me like she was searching for something she lost a long time ago. And for a moment I thought she might let me in. But instead she whispered, I think you should leave tomorrow. Felt like being punched in the chest. Is that what you really want? I asked quietly. Her lips trembled. It's what's best. I didn't sleep that night. The rain came back around midnight, soft and steady. I lay awake listening to it, wondering if she was doing the same. By morning, the house was already buzzing with tension. Sophie wasn't speaking to Emily, and Emily wasn't speaking to anyone. When I stepped out with my suitcase, she was standing by her car, keys in hand, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. I'll drive you back, she said. I hesitated. You don't have to. I want to. The drive was quiet. Too quiet. The road curved along the Hudson, sunlight breaking through clouds and patches. Finally she spoke. Sophie texted me this morning. She said she doesn't want to see me again. I didn't know what to say, so I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. We drove the rest of the way like the tin silence, our hands resting together between the seats, like something fragile neither of us wanted to admit existed. Back in the city, she dropped me off outside my apartment. I reached for the door handle, then stopped. Emily. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. If this is goodbye, I said softly, at least tell me it meant something. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It meant everything. Then she leaned in, kissed my forehead, and drove away before I could ask her to stay. Days turned into weeks. The office felt colder without her around. She'd taken a leave of absence, to sort things out. No one said it, but everyone whispered. The rumors spread fast in publishing circles, as they always did. "She's burned out," one editor said. "She's having a breakdown," another whispered. But no one really knew the truth, that she'd kissed her assistant at her sister's wedding and lost both in the process. I tried to move on. I really did. But every time I walked past her office, the door closed, her desk empty, I felt that same ache deep in my chest. One afternoon I found a letter on my desk. No return address, just my name written in her handwriting. My heart stuttered. I tore it open, hands shaking. "Claire, I told you to forget me, but I can't seem to forget you." I thought walking away was the right thing, but all I've done is run in circles around the memory of you. You see me in ways no one ever has, past the armor, past the expectations. I wanted to be brave for once, but bravery is hard when you've spent years pretending not to feel. I'm not asking you to wait for me. I just needed you to know it wasn't nothing. You changed me. And maybe someday when I'm less afraid, I'll find my way back to you. Emily, I reread it until the words blurred. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. That night, I went to the office rooftop. The city lights stretched out like constellations, cold, glittering, alive. Somewhere out there, she was trying to heal. And maybe so was I. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was late November when the first snow fell over Manhattan. The city had changed, holiday lights wrapped around every tree, carolers in scarves singing on street corners, the smell of roasted chestnuts blending with the crisp, cold air. But what hadn't changed was the hollow quiet in the office where Emily used to sit. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I got her letter. 3 months of silence. 3 months of trying to move on while every sound, every street, every faint scent of cedar and mint reminded me of her. I kept telling myself I was fine, that maybe some people were only meant to pass through our lives and leave behind a mark we couldn't erase. But deep down I knew I was still waiting. That afternoon, the winter issue went to print, me first solo project since Emily's absence. The whole team congratulated me, but their voices sounded far away, muffled under the hum of fluorescent lights and the echo of a question I couldn't shake. Would she even see it? As I packed my things, I noticed something on my desk, a white envelope. No name this time, just the faint scent of her perfume. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Claire, I saw your issue today. You did beautifully. You always do. I've been working from home these past few months trying to piece myself together." Sophie and I spoke. It wasn't easy, but we're mending. Maybe forgiveness is slow, but it's real. There's something I need to tell you. I'm leaving Hartman and Cole. I've taken a position at a small publishing house in Boston, something quieter, something that lets me breathe again. But before I go, there's one thing I can't leave undone. Meet me on the rooftop tonight, 9 p.m. if you still want to. Emily, I must have read it 10 times, my heartbeat drowning out the city noise outside. I didn't even think twice. By the time I reached the building, the snow had turned heavier, the kind that sticks to your hair and eyelashes. I took the elevator up, nerves buzzing beneath my skin. When the doors opened, the rooftop was empty except for a string of fairy lights someone had draped across the railing. The city sprawled below, wrapped in white and gold. And then I saw her. She stood near the edge, hands tucked into the pockets of her long beige coat, snowflakes melting in her auburn hair. For a moment I couldn't move. I just watched her like I was seeing something I dreamed of for too long. When she turned and saw me, she smiled, small but real. "You came," she said softly. "You asked," I replied. "Of course I did." We stood facing each other, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. "You're leaving," I said finally. "Boston." She nodded. "Next week." I swallowed hard. "So this is goodbye?" "Not if you don't want it to be," she said. "That's why I asked you here." Her voice was steady, but her eyes, those green, restless eyes, were full of something raw and unguarded. "I've spent months trying to convince myself that what happened between us was a mistake," she said. "That I crossed a line I never should have crossed. But every night I came up here, and it was the same, I kept wishing you were here too." The wind caught her words, carrying them into the cold. "I told myself it was easier to leave," she went on, "to start over somewhere new. But the truth is, every plan I make without you feels wrong." I felt my throat tighten. "Emily." She took a step closer. "You once told me I was scared of what I wanted. You were right. I was terrified of how much I could feel for someone, of how real it was. She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. But I don't want to be scared anymore. And just like that, the weight between us broke. I reached out, my gloved fingers brushing hers. You don't have to be. She let out a shaky breath. You still want this? After everything? I never stopped, I whispered. Her hand tightened around mine, and suddenly the world felt still again, like the night we first kissed. Only this time there was no guilt, no running, no pretending. Just us. We kissed under the falling snow. It was slow, tender, and full of the kind of quiet certainty you only find after being broken apart and finding your way back. Her lips were cold at first, then warm, and I felt every heartbeat, every tremor of emotion she'd kept locked away. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. God, I missed you, she breathed. Then don't leave, I said softly. Stay. She hesitated. Claire. I know Boston's important, I said. And maybe it's what you need. But maybe what you need isn't a place. Maybe it's someone who makes you feel at home again. She smiled through her tears. And you think that's you? I know it is. That night, for the first time, she laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that echoed off the rooftop. I forgot how stubborn you are, she said. I learned from the best. She shook her head, smiling. You make it sound so easy. It's not, I said. But love isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be worth it. And she looked at me like she finally believed that. The next morning, I helped her pack her office. The once bustling space was stripped bare, books in boxes, her awards stacked neatly by the door. She lingered at her desk, tracing her fingers along the surface where she used to leave me notes written in red ink. This place feels smaller than I remember, she said quietly. That's because you outgrew it, I replied. She smiled at that. Maybe we both did. When we finished, she turned to me. I meant what I said last night. I don't want to run anymore. But I still need to go for now. To prove to myself that I can build something new. On my own terms. I nodded, my chest aching but full. Then I'll be here when you come back. Promise. Promise. The weeks that followed felt lighter. We talked every night, calls that lasted hours, full of laughter, silence, and the kind of comfort that only comes from knowing you're seen completely. She sent photos of the snow-covered streets in Boston, her new office with stacks of manuscripts and a plant she claimed she'd try not to kill. I sent her drafts of my new column, Letters Never Sent, where I wrote about the beauty of unfinished conversations and the courage it takes to start again. Every letter, of course, was about her. By spring, she came back to New York just for a weekend, she said. But when she showed up at my apartment, suitcase in hand, and that same nervous, crooked smile, I knew she wasn't staying just for the weekend. I missed the noise, she said. The chaos. And you. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We cooked dinner together, burned the garlic bread, danced barefoot in my kitchen to old jazz records. When she leaned in to kiss me, it felt like every version of us, the broken, the scared, the hopeful, all came together in that one moment. Months passed and everything slowly fell into place. Sophie visited once, hesitant but warm. The two sisters hugged for a long time in the doorway, tears and laughter tangled together. Sophie looked at me afterward and smiled softly, like she finally understood. Their parents came around eventually. Time, it seemed, was the only thing strong enough to turn pain into acceptance. And as for us, we stopped hiding. At work events, at dinners, in the quiet corners of bookstores and parks, we held hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. 'Cause by then it was. One evening, almost a year after that wedding, we went back to the vineyard. It was off-season, empty, quiet, the vines bare but still beautiful. We walked the same path we had that night, stopping by the fence where everything changed. The wind was softer this time, warm and full of life. Emily looked around, smiling. You know, I used to hate this place. Why? Because it reminded me of everything I lost. She turned to me. Now it reminds me of what I found. I felt the sting of tears in my eyes. You really are a writer at heart. Guess I learned from you. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a silver key. What's this? I asked. The spare key to my apartment, she said, eyes glinting. In case you ever decide to stop pretending your place isn't already half mine. I laughed, taking it from her hand. So this is your big romantic gesture? No, she said, stepping closer. This is. And before I could reply, she kissed me slow and certain, the kind of kiss that doesn't ask questions or demand promises because it already knows the answer. As the sun dipped behind the hills, she whispered against my lips. Do you ever think about that first night? The kiss in the office? All the time, I said. What would you change? Nothing, I replied. Because it led me here. She smiled, brushing a snowflake, a petal this time from my hair. Then I guess it wasn't a mistake after all. No, I said softly. It was the beginning. And as the light faded, she took my hand, and we walked together through the vineyard. No secrets, no shadows, just two women who had finally found the courage to love without apology. In the distance, the first stars appeared, small, stubborn lights burning against the dark. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that some stories didn't have to end with heartbreak. Some stories, against all odds, get to stay. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.